I am Marcus James Dixon with Gold Derby, and we would like to welcome Volker Bertelmann to our Film Composers Oscar Shortlist panel for his work on Netflix's All Quiet on the Western Front. And Volker, before we get to talking about the movie, I would just love to know, what was your reaction to being one of the 15 composers who's been shortlisted for an Oscar nomination? That must have been a pretty cool day.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always well, a surprise, and at the same time you feel uplifted on that day, and it's lasting quite a while after that, after you know that you are acknowledged for your work.
Mm. And the original All Quiet from 1930, that was actually a Best Picture Oscar winner. And how knowledgeable were you of that film? And there was a book that it was based on from 1929. And did you read the book? Did you watch the movie before you got attached to this project?
Yeah, I was reading the book when I was a kid, or when I was a teenager. We had to read that in school as a literature that everybody was reading, and it was pretty exciting at that time to read that. I mean, it was pretty a very rough book in terms of the content, but as a teenager, you totally soak it in and you understand what it's all about. I was in that pretty close to the age of 18 when I was reading it, and for me, the question of going to the military or go into the civil service, which we could decide in Germany, was pretty close at that time. And I decided to go to choose the civil service and work at a hospital for 2 years.
Wow. The movie starts with this, very intense battle scene, and there is no music for the first few minutes until it kicks in after that battle scene. Can you talk about the decision? How do you know as the composer to hold back and not show any music at all? And how do you know when is the right time to do that?
Well, there's definitely an intuitive decision by yourself, but there's also other decisions or other decision makers that are also having different opinions. And in an ideal case, you have a really nice collaboration with someone and you talk about it, and you don't feel like you have to fulfill certain spots, or the spots are already marked as this is a music spot, this is one. In this case, Edward and me, we worked already on a couple of films together, and Edward is a director that really trusts you in a way. Once we talk about a few frame things, let's say, he said, I remember after the screening, he just said to me like 3 or 4 sentences. He said, I want to have a music for the stomach of Paul Bäumer, who's the main protagonist. I want to have destruction, and I want to have a snare that is played by somebody who can't play the snare, which was for me a little bit weird, because that was maybe the most difficult thing that I had to do, because I had to find a way of a snare rhythm that is not really sounding like in time. And what was also maybe one last thing that he said was, I really want to have something from you that you've never done before, which is a lot of pressure. And then you look at the beginning of the film, and I actually felt that when the war machine is starting, which is actually the machine when they start to capture the uniforms and they put them in the laundry and they start to wash them, and then they take the name tags off, and then they put new name tags on it. It's just to exchange, the human being that was wearing the uniform, which is actually we read about that this is happening right now at the front in Ukraine the same way, that things are in a way, these young men are starting to become a part of a very rational machinery, which of course causes a lot of pain for them, because they lose their youth in seconds or in a couple of minutes in a way. So that was where I thought the first sound should start, but it should be very iconic. And so I was searching for an instrument from that time that sounds modern, but at the same time very human, in a way. And that's the first 3 notes that are coming in. These are made by this instrument.
And those are the 3 notes that continue throughout the entire movie. Very iconic, instantly recognizable 3 notes. What is the instrument, and how did you decide that this would be kind of the ongoing motif of the film?
Well, it was a harmonium of my grandmother. I actually had it here in my studio, refurbished, tuned to 440, and had it in a very good shape. But I never used it because I really loved it, but I had no use so far for it. But when I returned from the spotting session from Berlin, I was sitting in the train and I was thinking, I need something that is an instrument that has a machinery, or that is, where I have to do something before the tones are coming out of it, and it has to be from that time. And my grandmother was having that harmonium in her house in 1920, between 1900 and 1914, definitely. And they were playing Bach chorals at that time. And so I went back and I just recorded these. Well, I recorded a little bit, a couple of longer melodies, but in the way I needed a very small fragment because there were so many war sounds, like specifically very heavy metallic sounds from the tanks, and the shootings were so loud that I needed a fragment that is visible in all these like loud noises. And so I felt it doesn't need to have a long melody. And so I just recorded those with a harmonium, and I put them through a big amplifier, with a heavy distortion, and I boosted the bass, and that was the first sound. And I sent actually this fragment, which was about 1 minute, which I normally not do. I don't send things right on the first day. I'm waiting. But in this case, I really was convinced that this could work, and I wanted to be sure that Edward is happy with that motive. And he was sending me on the next day, he was calling me, and he said, we're sitting here in our living room and we're listening to this piece. It sounds like Led Zeppelin. It's really heavy, and we really love it. You can feel the gravity of the War Machine. And so I was very happy about that.
I'm glad he said that, because I also got like a rock feel from those notes.
Mm-hmm.
And you previously worked with him on Your Honor and Patrick Melrose. Can you talk about your guys' working relationship, and how involved is he on the music side? Does he give you a lot of advice, or is he more like just receptive to what you have to say?
Well, I would say he's very musical, but he's not, he's not really giving me like a lot of things where he's pushing me towards something. The only thing he wants is, that I'm not working only with my left hand. He wants to have me full on in the work, and he wants to have something that is special, or that there is a research in the process. For example, for Patrick Melrose, I searched a long time for music that sounded a little bit like glam rock, or things that had a little bit, something of that time. And I thought cembalo, for example, was a great instrument for that. And so I was searching for cembalos that I really loved. And, this kind of process makes you also slowly slide into the film, and also bringing your personality to it. But at the same time, this film, I didn't want it to be too big and too cliche, to create a cliche of a war film in a way. And that means like you have to be really restrained, and you need somebody who is actually willing to have you being restrained, and not like to make music from the first picture to the end. And so we had a long talk about that, and Edward is definitely a person that says, can we have here silence, and can we here have silence, in the moments where I think it's mostly we are both agreeing to the same spots.
And, being that this is a war film and a very serious project, what kind of pressure does that put on you, that you have to feel like you want to get this right? You don't want to let anyone down.
Mhm. Well, I mean, you know, this film is also the first German interpretation of that book, and it's also in German language. And as we know, I mean, all the war films that I've seen, which I really like, are much more done from the perspective of, you know, of honor and pride, because of course there is a different perspective, you know, in England and in America about the Second World War. We feel mostly shame and guilt about the war, and that was transported in our, you know, in our generation in a way. So if you work on a film like that, you really have to make sure that there's no heroism in there, that you don't build too much of a, you know, of some pride in the wrong area. You need to be fragile and sensitive, and I think that was pretty much a difficulty, because of course a war film has a lot of power. So when you put that on the screen, you need to find your spaces and the sense in where you want to place music, and where you there were of course 3 big battle scenes where I had to fight with, in a way, with the sound, you know, with Frank Cruz, who did the sound for the film. But we always talked to each other beforehand, and we said, what kind of sounds are you using? And he was always sending me updates about that. And so we could find our spots in those, also in these bigger fight scenes. And so that, I think that was my responsibility to value the music in the right way.
Mm. Well, thank you for chatting with us. Congrats on making the Oscar shortlist. And I just want
Thank
to
you.
say your score for Lion from 2016 is one of the best ever. I hope you must be so proud of that one. But thank you for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much, Marcus.